The Iliad, ancient folklore, compiled by Homer in 800 BC, translated by Robert Fagles in 1990. An ancient book split up into 24 sections, depicting a large, heavily embellished chunk of the Trojan War. Judging from what many historians have managed to piece together, this book was essentially treated like a college course. Except all of them. At once. Every single thing you needed to know to succeed in ancient Greek society was contained somewhere within this book. And today, we're looking at them all. These are the top 10 values in the Iliad. And in case you needed a spoiler alert on a 3,000-year-old book, well, here you go. Number 10. Life. Life is a very common value in both ancient and modern societies. A society basically can't exist without valuing life in some way. And given that this book is about war, yeah, obviously some stuff about life is going to show up somewhere in there. Now, obviously, a society retaining the idea that life is important is really nothing special. Let's take that a step further and look at the individual life. Very few ancient societies valued individual lives as extensively as the Greeks. They would often hold massive ceremonies to honor those who had died, to ensure that their souls would properly be accepted into the House of Hades. Very much like the modern-day funeral, except a bit more widespread. The loss of one great warrior was a tragedy to the entire town. And of course, this is demonstrated in the Iliad as well. Every single character, no matter how minor, has a backstory. Every single death is mourned by someone, and the book lets you know this. Even within battle, every individual life is valued. Rarely does anyone ever just die. During each battle, every minor character has a little personal obituary, and during each duel, at least one major character has an in-depth paragraph-long speech begging for their life. And speaking of which, number 9. Ransoms, and the futility of such. One of the most common ways for a soldier to beg for his life as a last resort is to offer himself up a ransom. Though it almost never works, and really only ever succeeds to make the character look like a desperate coward, which is more than likely an attempt for the book to tell the reader that if they're ever about to die, they should just accept their fate and not bother. Still though, that doesn't stop people from trying. Which is demonstrated by this short stanza repeated about 5 times throughout the book, and even paraphrased by Hector. Take me alive, Atrides, take a ransom worth my life. Treasures are piled up in my rich father's house, bronze and gold and plenty of well-wrought iron. My father would give you anything, gladly. Priceless ransom, if only he learns I'm still alive in the Argive ships. It's almost kind of embarrassing, really. Grown men, soldiers, warriors even, having to resort to asking their dad to bail them out. And speaking of dads, number 8. Fathers. Throughout all of ancient Greek culture, fathers were considered the most important role model in a young man's life. Fathers were almost always the ones who raised and taught the kids, and were therefore always the first in line to steal all the credit from their kids' achievements. This is reflected in the Iliad by Homer's writing style. A very common way to introduce someone in this book is to list the name of their father. Very rarely is anyone just Achilles or just Diomedes. It's always Achilles, son of Peleus, Diomedes, son of Tydeus, Agamemnon, son of Atreus, Hector, son of Priam, Apollo, son of Zeus, Hermes, son of Zeus, Hephaestus, son of Zeus, Heracles, son of Zeus, Perseus, son of Zeus, Zeus, son of Cronus. It's also demonstrated through the story of Phoenix, a man who was forced to kill his own father and ran himself out of town because he couldn't live with the reputation. Even though his actions were relatively justified, he still knew he'd be shamed for it, even if he did explain himself. You could say that the Greek family system was very patriarchal. And while on the subject, number 7, the role of women. It's no secret that many ancient societies were deeply, deeply misogynistic. Greece was one of them, and possibly one of the worst. For Hephaestus' sake, the only reason women even exist in ancient Greece is because Zeus wanted to punish men. In some versions of the story of the first woman, Pandora, she had a box. Not here. The introduction of women was all the evil Zeus needed. And I'm barely even paraphrasing here, that's the crazy part. To get an idea of the Greek view of a perfect woman, imagine a walking, talking vagina. Actually, no, not even talking, just like a large, mobile, sentient vagina. And that's definitely reflected in the Iliad. It's relatively subtle, but it's there. Women are pretty much treated as things. They aren't allowed to join the war, they're constantly forced into subservience on a near-daily basis as their marriage is constantly offered as a prize or ransom, and their feelings are either mocked or completely dismissed. What? You want to be a warrior? Oh, well, too bad you got that vagina. What? You want to live independently? Oh, well, your vagina's getting in the way. What? You want to be treated like a human being? Ha! Tell that to your vagina. What? You don't want to have sex with this man? Well, too bad, because the god of beauty herself thinks you're perfect for each other, and she will gladly threaten to kill you if you don't satisfy him, which is technically considered rape in most sane areas. To conclude, a quote from Homer himself. Booties and racks, fling in these stacks, shut up and make me a sandwich. Number 6. Masculinity. Really, it's no surprise how such a grossly misogynistic culture enforcing such strict gender roles may also retain very high, very damaging standards of masculinity as well, paraded around and treated like a commonplace expectation. Obviously, women have it way worse, honestly it's not even comparable, but women are pretty much completely shoved to the side in both this book and most of Greek literature, meaning that the experiences and stories of men get pushed to the forefront and are therefore presented as a greater value even though they're clearly not. Now what does that remind you of? If men are to make anything out of themselves, if they are to be remembered, they must be warriors. They must be both strong and successful in their plight. And any man who fails to meet the standards set for them is either mocked or shunned completely. Paris, an allegedly beautiful man, praised by Aphrodite herself, is portrayed constantly throughout the book as a weak, prissy, arrogant, and incompetent slacker, for despite his beauty, he is weak and has very bad aim. Achilles, a man who refuses to fight in the war until the death of Patroclus persuades him, despite having very legitimate reasons to abstain from the war, is ridiculed for it constantly. Treated like less of a man for not wanting to die in the name of a lost cause. The only time it's seen as justified for a man to display any emotion other than pride is in the case of a significant loss. Which actually ties into my next point. Number 5. Death. Many say that true civilization is formed when people begin to bury their dead, as it demonstrates an acknowledgement in the value of life and the significance of death. The Greeks take this a step further. As each soldier is killed, their life story is delivered in detail, either to honor their existence or to call attention to the tragic irony of such a fate. Every single individual death is treated like its own chunk of the story. The Greek treatment of death was very ceremonious, almost to the extent of modern society. It was believed that a certain ritual must be performed on a body for its soul to safely make it to the house of Hades, which is why dead bodies are valued heavily by the family of the deceased and are often fought over in war. Their concern with death laid less on death itself and more on the bodies of those who had died. There's no higher form of disrespect one can show a person than to steal or desecrate their dead body. Several bloody battles have raged over the corpse of a single soldier. The battle over the armor and body of Patroclus, for example, lasted a good 4 chapters, and the corresponding mourning from the Achaeans lasted a good 6. Moral of the story, if you're gonna die, die in Greece. But make sure you're not too popular. Number 4. Arete. While no direct English translation exists, the Greek concept of arete is very similar to the modern concept of excellence. However, unlike modern society where students are expected to be well-rounded and good at everything, for one to achieve arete they just had to be the best they could possibly be at one specific thing, and really hone in on that thing, build their life around that one thing. Arete revolves around 2 simple concepts: imperfection and individuality. The first of which, imperfection, is pretty self-explanatory. The Greeks recognized that even from a conceptual standpoint, perfection was unachievable. So, to achieve arete, one did not have to be perfect, they just had to be the best they could possibly be. It's a system built around the idea of inherent human limitation. Flaws are both expected and accepted. It's rare for anyone to be overwhelmed in their attempts to achieve arete, as they get to set their own pace, and their expectations are set by their own achievements and limits. House of Hades, not even the gods themselves were perfect, and no one pretended they were. The gods achieved their arete by striving for near absolute power or near objective beauty, even if it meant they were terrible people, which most of the time they were. Gonna stop myself before I go on a rant here. As for individuality, arete is a very non-conformative concept. Any feasible skill, once mastered, can serve as an access point to arete. No one is held back by social bounds or stigmas. Individuality is not only enabled, but encouraged. Anyone can have arete. Warriors, farmers, teachers, barbarians, even horses can have arete if they're strong enough. You like archery? Well, go out there and be the best archer you can be. You like fighting? Go out there and slay as many soldiers as you can. You like running? Go out there and run as many laps as you can. You like making internet videos? Stop wasting your life, you waste of oxygen. This is demonstrated in Agamemnon's tirade in Book 4, where he praises warriors, soldiers, and even Cretans for their performance. Arete is pretty much a perfect system. A system based around the abilities, limitations, and imperfections of the individual. No one is held back by anything but their own willingness and drive to follow through. One is not praised for what they do, but how well they do it. Well, I guess technically that does mean that a serial killer could have arete. Yeah, never mind. Scratch everything. The system's terrible. Number 3. Courage. This one is just a basic connect the dots. To be remembered as a warrior, you must be a good soldier. And to be a good soldier, you must be courageous. For any war hero to be respected, they must be incredibly courageous. Courage was treated as a necessity during the war, and there was no bigger insult you could give to a warrior than to call them a coward. And this would be fine if it weren't for the ridiculously high standard of courage that the war inflicted. In ancient Greek times, to be courageous is to be blind to inevitable loss. Any suggestion to retreat or forfeit, no matter how reasonable, is immediately shot down, and tend to reflect badly on the ones who suggest them. The negative impact this can have on people is staggering. Agamemnon, for example, realizes pretty early on that the gods are against him and can clearly see the impending loss of the Achaean army. Yet he keeps getting reprimanded whenever he tries to warn people about it. He is slowly driven insane by this, and eventually just disappears entirely. The moral of the story? Don't be a hero. For the love of the gods, don't be a hero. And speaking of loving the gods, number 2, worship. In the Trojan War, you tend to see soldiers praying and sacrificing to the gods on an almost hourly basis. And they're probably wise to do so because, surprise surprise, the gods control everything. Every twist and turn, every major death, every shift of power is due to a mortal interference of some kind. Who sent Agamemnon a false dream encouraging him to send out the ships and continue the war? Zeus. How does Paris ultimately survive his battle against Menelaus? Help from Aphrodite. How did Diomedes gain godly strength, allowing him to confront and physically attack the gods? Help from Athena. Who saves Hector's ass from being killed by Ajax right at the start? Apollo. Why do none of Teucer's arrows ever hit Hector? Help from Apollo. Who gave Diomedes the strength to kill the Trojan king? Athena. Who revived Hector after great Ajax knocked him unconscious? Apollo. How did Hector reach the Achaean ships and set fire to one of them? Help from Zeus. How did Hector kill Patroclus? Help from Apollo. How does Sarpedon survive the battle long enough to break the first hole in the Achaean wall? Help from Zeus. How did the Trojans survive the rage of Achilles for so long? Help from the gods. How did Achilles manage to kill Hector? Help from Athena. And how is Hector able to lift the rock that breaks the Achaean gate? Hardcore deadlifting. And also help from Zeus. And when you take into account the fact that Hector and Patroclus only died as part of Zeus's master plan to get Achilles to fight, the battles are really nothing more than a godly game of chess. So remember, kids, pray to the gods each night and sacrifice to them every day. Or else you'll die. And now, a few honorable mentions. Epithets. This isn't really much of a value as it is a common occurrence, but it's definitely a very prevalent one. Characters are often referred to by either the most prevalent personal or physical trait, to give them more of an immediate personality. No one is just Zeus, or just Hector. It's always Zeus, god of lightning, Lord of man Agamemnon, the swift runner Achilles, the long-haired Achaeans, Apollo, god of the silver bow, man-killing Hector, and so on. Horses. Horses are pretty much the Greek equivalent of modern-day cars, and boy are they treated like it. They're used as a primary source of travel, they're protected as valuables, and they're often stolen. Some of them are even honored by the gods. Trust me, if Facebook existed back in the day, you'd have at least 2 friends constantly posting pictures of horses on their timeline. Horses were actually valued more than women were. Well, to be fair, some coins were valued more than women in ancient Greek society, but, you know. And finally, love. The reason Achilles chooses not to fight for a majority of the book is not because of cowardice, but heartbreak for the loss of Briseis and sympathy for the losses of others. Why must we battle Trojans, men of Argos? Why did he muster an army, lead us here, that son of Atreus? Why? Why in the world, if not for Helen with her loose and lustrous hair? Are they the only men who love their wives, these sons of Atreus? Never. Any decent man, a man with sense, loves his own, cares for his own as deeply as I. I love that woman with all my heart, though I won her like a trophy with my spear. But now that he's torn my honor from my hands, robbed me, lied to me, don't let him try me now. I know him too well, he'll never win me over. And now that the tone is set, number 1. Honor. This is the Iliad's central theme, the honor of war. A weird yet welcoming concept. The Greek had a very strict implied rule set for each battle. They would wake up, feast, organize a battle, fight, feast again, and sleep. Soldiers would attack, kill, loot the armor of the kill if they wished, and return to the battle. They would repeat this cycle until ultimate death. This was the honor of war. It was a basic system of mutual trust meant to instill balance. And when the system was broken, it was believed that chaos was released. This is reflected especially well in the Iliad's final chapter. Despite the build-up, despite the foreshadowing, despite the flat-out spoilers, Achilles never actually died at the end of the book. Achilles barters away the body of Hector, a funeral is held, and the book just kinda ends. Because at this point, all honor had been lost. In the span of a few short weeks, soldiers were enraged, Agamemnon went insane, walls were demolished, spies were sent out and troops were infiltrated overnight, ships were burned, week-long battles were raged over the dead bodies of other warriors. Soldiers fought like barbarians, killing other soldiers, looting their armor, and then being killed by other soldiers while they looted their kill, in an endless cycle. Even Achilles, the noblest of warriors, lost his honor when rage overtook him. Instead of respecting Hector's last wishes and giving his body back to the Trojans for proper burial, he kept it, mutilated it, dragged it back to his ships, and dragged it around even more for fun. This caused the gods, as well as many of Achilles' own men, to turn against him. And it would have likely led to an uprising had Achilles not eventually traded his body away to Nestor. Honor was gone. So the book ended, because when honor is gone, both sides have lost. Each side lost a legendary warrior, both cities were damaged, the gods' forces were split amongst themselves, families were torn apart, thousands were dead, Achilles, the most powerful warrior of all, was destined to die. Chaos had been unleashed. It took the death of 2 great warriors and the mutilation of their dead bodies just to instill a momentary peace. The war was brought to a standstill, for when honor is lost, chaos runs rampant. When honor is lost, fighting is futile. There are no winners in a dishonorable war, only losers. When honor is lost, the book ends. because the war, as we know it, is over. I'm the Double Agent, I'll see you all in a couple weeks, and Jacob, good luck with your future endeavors.